The first time I saw tomorrow's date in the access logs, I assumed the system clock had drifted. The second time I saw it, I checked my phone. The third time it happened, the entry wasn't scheduled for later. It was already marked complete. And according to the building's records, I had already left the facility 6 hours before my shift ended. I wasn't hired as a security guard. Not exactly. My job title was overnight monitoring technician, which mostly meant I watched the building behave. That's the simplest way I can explain it. I didn't patrol with keys. I didn't carry a radio. I didn't sit in a lobby watching doors. I worked inside a small operations office halfway down the main corridor of a calibration facility that handled diagnostic equipment before it shipped to hospitals. The building wasn't open to the public. Most of the employees worked regular daytime schedules. After midnight, there was only one authorized person inside. Me. That part was important. It wasn't a staffing decision. It was a systems decision. The facility had recently replaced its access control infrastructure, and for the first few months after installation, overnight movement had to remain traceable to a single credential. One badge. One entry trail. One presence inside the building. That made troubleshooting easier. It also meant that if something happened overnight, the logs would always match one person. The person inside. Me. My shift started at midnight. The building switched to restricted mode automatically at 11:58. Interior corridors locked. Calibration rooms sealed. Storage zones monitored through environmental dashboards instead of patrol rotation. After that point, only my badge could open internal doors. The idea was simple. No confusion. No overlapping credentials. No shared access. If a door opened overnight, it would be recorded under my name. The first time tomorrow's date appeared in the logs, I noticed it while reviewing routine door activity. Door 3B. Access granted. Timestamp, 2:11 a.m. tomorrow. Except it wasn't tomorrow. It was still the middle of my shift. Still the same night. Still hours before midnight rolled over. I assumed the local controller had desynchronized from the central archive. That happens sometimes. Especially after firmware updates. So I refreshed the dashboard. The entry stayed. Same timestamp. Same credential. Same door. Still marked for tomorrow. I checked my watch. Then my phone. Then the workstation clock. All three matched. None of them showed tomorrow's date. Only the access log did. The next entry appeared 20 minutes later. Door 2C. Access granted. Timestamp, 2:32 a.m. tomorrow. Again. Same pattern. Same corridor wing. Same credential. Mine. I checked the hallway camera covering door 2C. Nothing moved. The corridor light stayed dim. The reader never activated. The door never opened. The system still recorded access. Just not tonight. Tomorrow. I documented both entries in the shift notes and sent a message to the coordinator before the end of the shift. He replied the next afternoon. Said it was probably a timestamp rollover issue during archive synchronization. Said the system would correct itself overnight. It sounded reasonable. The building had only switched to the new infrastructure 2 weeks earlier. Minor inconsistencies were expected. So I kept working. The next night the logs showed 3 entries from tomorrow. All under my credential. All already completed. They didn't appear as pending events. They didn't appear as projected activity. They appeared as finished access records. Doors opened. Doors closed. Movement completed. Except none of it had happened yet. That was when I checked the archive viewer. Not the daily dashboard. The long-term compliance archive. It stored entries separately from the live monitoring interface. Sometimes archived timestamps corrected before the dashboard updated. Sometimes they didn't. But the archive matched the dashboard exactly. Same doors. Same times. Same credential. All marked for tomorrow. The building itself didn't feel different during any of this. That's what made it harder to take seriously at first. Nothing unusual happened overnight. No unexpected sounds. No unlocked doors. No motion alerts. No temperature drift outside normal calibration ranges. Everything behaved exactly the way it was supposed to. Only the logs were wrong. On the third night the entries appeared earlier. Not during the shift. Before it. At 11:42 p.m., while I was still sitting in my car outside the building, I opened the monitoring interface on my phone. One entry already existed. Door 1A. Access granted. Timestamp, 12:09 a.m., tomorrow. The entry wasn't waiting to happen. It had already happened. According to the system. I checked the parking lot camera before going inside. No movement. No vehicles. No one approaching the building. The exterior doors remained closed. The corridor lights inside the vestibule stayed dim. Nothing looked different from any other night. Inside the security office, the dashboard updated again. 2 more entries appeared. Both tomorrow. Both mine. Both inside the calibration wing. I checked the hallway camera covering door 1A. The door stayed closed. The reader never activated. The corridor remained empty. Exactly the way it always looked before midnight. The entries kept coming after that. Not constantly. Not dramatically. Just 1 or 2 each shift. Always tomorrow. Always already completed. Always under my credential. At first I assumed the system clock would correct itself. It didn't. Instead, the entries started appearing closer to real time. Door 2B. Access granted. Timestamp, 1:18 a.m. Tomorrow. Then 15 minutes later. Door 3C. Access granted. Timestamp, 1:33 a.m. tomorrow. The pattern was consistent. The building recorded movement that hadn't happened yet. And the movement always belonged to me. The coordinator stopped responding after the second week. Not entirely. He answered temperature alerts. Environmental checks. Routine confirmations. But he never mentioned the timestamps again. Even when I attached screenshots. Even when I asked directly if the archive server had finished synchronization. Even when I asked whether other facilities were seeing the same issue. The first time tomorrow's entries matched my actual movement was the night I stopped checking the logs for a while. I'd been working through a calibration drift report when I walked down corridor 2B to verify a storage seal. When I returned to the desk, I saw the entry already listed. Door 2B. Access granted. Timestamp, 1:18 a.m. Tomorrow. Exactly the time I had just walked there. Except the entry had appeared earlier. Before I left the office. Before I started walking. Before I reached the corridor. The system had already recorded it. I checked the archive viewer. Same entry. Same timestamp. Still tomorrow. Still marked complete. Even though I had just performed it minutes earlier. That was the first time I considered that the logs weren't drifting forward. They were leading me. The next night I stayed inside the office longer than usual. Watching the dashboard. Waiting to see whether the entries appeared before I moved. At 12:41 a.m. one did. Door 3A. Access granted. Timestamp, 12:52 a.m. tomorrow. 11 minutes ahead. I didn't walk there. Not immediately. I waited. Tried to see whether the entry would disappear. It didn't. The timestamp stayed. Still tomorrow. Still mine. Still complete. At 12:52 exactly, I walked down the corridor. Badged in normally. Watched the second entry appear beneath the first. Same door. Same credential. Same time. 2 identical records. One already there. One newly created. After that I stopped thinking of them as errors. Because errors don't repeat with that kind of precision. The entries began appearing earlier each night. Sometimes 30 minutes ahead. Sometimes an hour. Sometimes before I arrived at the building at all. One night I checked the dashboard from home before leaving. 3 entries already existed. All tomorrow. All inside the calibration wing. All marked complete. That night I changed my routine. Instead of following the usual patrol sequence, I stayed inside the office. Didn't walk the corridors. Didn't check storage doors. Didn't verify seal panels. Just watched the dashboard. Waiting to see whether the entries still appeared. They did. Door 1B. Access granted. Timestamp, 1:07 a.m. tomorrow. Then door 2C. Then door 3A. All tomorrow. All complete. All under my credential. While I hadn't moved at all. I checked the hallway cameras. All empty. Every corridor. Every reader. Every door closed. Exactly the way they should have been. That was when I opened the archive viewer again. Not just tonight's entries. Not just tomorrow's. All of them. The archive stored activity by date. Day by day. Shift by shift. Credential by credential. I scrolled forward. Past tonight. Past tomorrow. Past the end of the week. My credential appeared every night. Same building. Same corridors. Same movement pattern. Same access sequence. Days I hadn't worked yet. Days I hadn't even scheduled. Days I hadn't agreed to cover. The system already knew where I would be. And when. I checked the earliest future entry. Door 3C. Access granted. Timestamp, 2:41 a.m. next Thursday. 7 days ahead. Already completed. Already archived. Already mine. That night I stayed inside the office longer than usual. Watching the hallway camera grid. Watching the dashboard. Waiting for another entry to appear. At 2:18 a.m. one did. Door 2B. Access granted. Timestamp, 2:18 a.m. tomorrow. Exactly 24 hours ahead. I didn't move. Didn't leave the chair. Didn't touch the reader. Just watched the entry appear. Then watched the hallway camera covering door 2B. The corridor lights switched from standby to active brightness. The door opened slightly. Just enough to notice. Then closed again. The dashboard still showed tomorrow's timestamp. Still showed my credential. Still showed completed movement. But I hadn't moved. I checked the hallway outside the office. Then the storage corridor. Then the calibration wing entrance. Everything stayed empty. Everything stayed quiet. Everything stayed exactly the way it should have been. Except the entry existed. And the door had moved. That was the moment I understood the logs weren't predicting where I would go. They were recording where I already had. I returned the badge the next morning without explaining anything. The supervisor didn't ask questions. He placed it in the equipment drawer like it belonged there. Like it had always been there. A week later I checked the compliance registry online. The calibration wing still operates under single credential overnight protocol. According to the most recent archive record, only one person entered the building last night. And according to the timestamp, I'll be leaving in about 20 minutes.